I just want to add there that although we know that Gabapito's death was ruled a homicide, we actually don't know if she was a victim of domestic violence at the moment. But Margarita, let me come to you and ask you specifically about the need for culturally specific answers to some of these very, very troubling questions we've been raising.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking that question. I was thinking, Rachel, when you were responding, how different communities just experience law enforcement differently, right? We work with a community who really measures their good fortune by the fact that law enforcement may never know they exist. And so they're not going to reach out to those resources because they see them as predatory, because they are terrified of unintended consequences that might come connected, even if they do believe that that system is more powerful than their abusive partner, or maybe they know for a fact that it is. They don't want there to be the unintended consequences connected to deportation, right? In New York City, we had a series of arrests and deportations that took place in court, and whether or not those were outcomes that were important for the safety of the people involved, it had a chilling effect on our communities who chose to not go to court and to not seek out any services, even civil orders of protection, because ICE was in the courthouses or waiting outside the courthouses to pick people up. So there are so many, it's so important to have a culturally specific response, because we're a bridge, we're a trusted bridge for community members, right? One of the things that mainstream and law enforcement entities have not been that successful at doing is reaching out to those communities, and we're able to do that.
Rachel, we've mentioned the pandemic already today, but I really would like to ask you about how these prolonged periods of isolation, enforced intimacy have exacerbated problems, and what we know and what we should be doing as we move ahead and we hope out of this pandemic.
Well, I think Margarita answered that. Sorry, I didn't mean to call you Margarita. I think she answered that. In terms of priorities, the number one thing we have to do is programming for young people. I talked about, gosh, I don't even know how many cases, 100 cases or something like this in my book, and every single one of them had a young woman meeting the person who would eventually kill her when she was 14, 15 years old. So teen dating violence, sexual assault, consent, all of these issues are combined, and they're so important. The other thing we saw, though, with the pandemic was that there was this sort of bracing among, shelters and hotlines. Like they thought there was going to be this flood of victims. You saw many cities like Chicago, for example, where I'm originally from, renting out, huge blocks of hotel rooms, just kind of waiting. And that flood didn't come, and what we learned was that people were really stuck. They couldn't get to the hotlines. They couldn't get out of their house to escape. The levels now are sort of back where they were pre-pandemic in terms of the hotline and shelters. But what's happening is there's just no money. We talked a little bit about Representatives Spear and Dingell earmarking several $100 million. The entire Violence Against Women Act was only, at its last passage, was only $500 million. It's just nothing. It is just nothing when you consider the unbelievable, catastrophic effects on so many different social issues that we're facing today. It's not an isolated event, domestic violence. It interacts with homelessness, it interacts with mental health, it interacts with mass shootings and lost wages and all kinds of other, medical bills and things like that. So all kinds of other issues that we face.